Hello, I'm Veronica Hale, a marriage psychologist and the host of Love and Lies TV. Today, I want to tell you a story that even I, someone who has heard hundreds of cases of infidelity, couldn't quite shake off. Not because it's overly dramatic, but because it shows just how cruel people can become when love is replaced by selfishness. Our main character is Ethan, 36 years old, a calm, private man who believed he had found peace in his marriage to his wife, Bella. After 8 years together, they decided not to have children. They just wanted to enjoy each other and the quiet life they had built. Ethan used to say he needed nothing more than a woman who understood him and stayed loyal. But maybe that's the cruel irony of life. The moment we feel safest is often when we're most vulnerable. It all began when Ethan's younger brother, Daniel, came to visit after years apart. At first, it was just small things: averted eyes, hesitant words, awkward smiles. He sensed something was off. But in love, we all try to believe in the best, don't we? Ethan did too. He brushed off his doubts, convincing himself he was being oversensitive. But a few months later, the truth came out, in the most brutal way possible. Ethan discovered that Bella had been cheating on him with his own brother. And if that wasn't devastating enough, she later tried to seduce his father. Yes, you heard that right. The same woman who once called him the love of her life crossed that unthinkable line with the man who gave him life. Ethan told me about the moment his father confessed. She came into my room last night, and I had to push her out of the house. Can you imagine that? The moment you realize the person you love most has reached the deepest level of betrayal? Sometimes infidelity isn't just cheating, it's the act of killing someone's spirit. It strips away trust, something a person may have spent their whole life building. And Ethan, once a gentle, trusting man, had to learn how to stand up again, not to get revenge, but to reclaim his self-respect. This isn't just Ethan's story, it's the story of so many people, those who loved with all their heart, only to be betrayed with the coldness of the one they trusted most. Because when doubt begins, it never crashes in like a storm. It seeps in quietly, drop by drop, like the sound of water dripping in an empty room. And the more you try to ignore it, the louder it becomes. For Ethan, it all began with the smallest things. The first sign was Daniel, his younger brother, suddenly becoming strangely reserved. They used to be close. They could sit for hours talking about baseball, childhood memories, their mother. But this time, Daniel spoke curtly, avoided eye contact, and when he did smile, it was forced, the kind of awkward smile only family can recognize. And Bella, Ethan's gentle, affectionate wife, started to grow distant. She often claimed she was tired, avoided his hugs, and seemed uncomfortable even sitting next to him. One evening, Ethan walked into the living room and saw the two of them talking quietly. But the moment he appeared, the air froze. Both smiled nervously. That awkward, guilty kind of smile you give when you've just been caught doing something you shouldn't. He said nothing, partly because he didn't want to believe it, and partly because he didn't have the strength to face what his heart already knew. Because sometimes, it's not the truth we fear, it's the possibility that we might be right. Ethan tried to find reasonable explanations. Maybe Daniel's going through something. Maybe Bella's just tired. Maybe I'm overthinking, he told himself that, night after night. But Bella's uneasy smile, Daniel's averted gaze, the quiet distance growing between them, it all started to paint a picture that was becoming painfully clear. Then, one night, Bella's phone buzzed on the table. The name on the screen lit up. Daniel. That feeling. Unless you've lived it, you can't understand. It isn't loud. It isn't rage. It's a coldness that seeps all the way to your bones. Ethan didn't answer. He just sat there, silently watching the screen flash until it went dark again. When we love someone, we like to believe that love itself is strong enough to protect everything. But for Ethan, that belief was beginning to crack, piece by piece. And he didn't know that what was quietly crumbling inside him was the beginning of the worst nightmare of his life. Time passed, but some instincts never go silent. Ethan tried to move on, to convince himself he was being too sensitive. He threw himself back into work, back into routine. But every time he looked at Bella, a cold, sharp feeling stabbed through him, an instinct whispering that something between them had already shattered. Then one day, the whole family was invited to a relative's wedding in another state. Daniel was coming too, along with their father, Robert, a man who had lost his wife years ago and remained the steady anchor of the family. Ethan tried to act normal when he saw Daniel again, but deep down, all the memories of suspicion came rushing back. Bella, on the other hand, was different. She was warm, composed, almost perfect. She laughed, chatted with Daniel as if nothing had ever happened, as if there had never been a secret between them. That night, the wedding was in full swing. Laughter, music, clinking glasses. Ethan was busy catching up with relatives, while Bella said she was tired and went back to their room early. A small detail, really, but it was the beginning of another nightmare. The next morning, while Ethan was having breakfast with his father, Robert, the old man spoke quietly. "Son, I need to tell you something, and I wish I wasn't the one who had to." In the stillness of that room, his father told him everything. After leaving the party, Bella had come to his door in the middle of the night. At first, she said she just wanted to talk and unwind. But then she started acting intimate. She brushed against him, tried to kiss him, even slipped one strap of her dress off her shoulder. Robert had to push her away and order her to leave immediately. He said, "I didn't do anything, son." But you need to know, this woman has no boundaries left. Ethan froze. What he felt wasn't rage anymore. It was collapse. A slow, hollow breaking inside him. Every suspicion he'd buried, every uneasy feeling, all of it had been true. He just hadn't had the courage to face it. A few hours later, Robert helped Ethan check Daniel's phone to be sure. And there it was. Undeniable. Messages between Bella and Daniel. "I can't stop thinking about that night at his house." "I know. I feel so guilty too." They had slept together, and now Bella had tried to do the same with her father-in-law. Ethan sat there in silence, his hands trembling, his heartbeat slow, each thud heavy, like a blade sinking deeper into his chest. The woman he loved had become a stranger, and Daniel, the little brother he once protected all his life, was now nothing more than a name in memory. Ethan realized then, this wasn't just betrayal. This was the total collapse of trust, the only thing that keeps love alive. That evening, the wedding celebration carried on. Music, laughter, champagne. The golden light reflected off Bella's face. She smiled, laughed, toasted like the perfect wife. No one could have imagined that just hours later, she would do something that would destroy an entire family. Close to midnight, Bella pretended to be drunk. She told Ethan she was tired and asked to go back to the room early. He didn't suspect a thing. He thought she was just sensitive to alcohol. He even said, "Drink some water and get some sleep, okay?" She smiled, nodded softly, eyes calm as the night breeze. But that night, Bella never went back to their room. She went straight to Robert's, her father-in-law, a man who had only ever treated her with kindness and respect. When he opened the door, he was surprised to see her standing there in her evening gown. Bella said she couldn't sleep, that she just wanted to talk for a bit. Robert, seeing her as a daughter, invited her in, never imagining what was about to happen next. But within minutes, everything changed. Bella moved closer, brushing her hand lightly against Robert's arm, letting out a soft, almost playful laugh. Robert later recalled how her voice shifted, lower, slurred, half drunk, half calculated. Then, suddenly, she leaned in, placed a hand on his chest and whispered, "You look so strong. Now I see where Ethan gets it from." He froze, startled. He tried to keep calm, thinking maybe she was drunk. But then her hand began to slide lower, and she tried to pull him closer for a kiss. When he pushed her away, Bella murmured, "I'm not drunk." I know exactly what I'm doing at that moment. Robert had to physically shove her out of the room and slam the door shut, shaking with a mix of anger, disgust, and guilt. He didn't sleep that night. He just sat there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about his poor son, the man who still believed he had a faithful wife waiting for him. The next morning, when Ethan joined him at breakfast, Robert stayed silent for a long time before finally speaking. "Son, I need to tell you something, and I wish to God I didn't have to be the one." Then he told Ethan everything, every word, every gesture, every moment. Ethan sat motionless, unable to speak. It felt like his heart was being crushed from the inside. In that instant, he realized that the woman he had once protected, trusted completely, had reached the absolute depth of betrayal. She hadn't just betrayed him with his brother. She had tried to shatter something sacred, the bond between father and son. Ethan looked at his father, an aging, broken man, and understood that this was no longer a story about love or marriage. This was decay, a moral collapse of someone who had lost her soul entirely. And for Ethan, that night didn't just kill love, it killed the last piece of faith he had in humanity. When pain passes a certain point, words become useless. All that's left is action. The next morning, Ethan walked into Daniel's room. His brother was packing his bags. There were no greetings, no questions, just a stare. A heavy, leaden silence. Then Ethan's fist came down, hard, deliberate, carrying 8 years of trust betrayed. Daniel stumbled back, stunned, blood on his lip, eyes wide with shock and regret. But Ethan said nothing. He just stood there, staring at the man who used to be his brother, now nothing more than a stranger. Finally, he said quietly, "You're dead to me. From now on, you're not part of this family." There was no hatred in his voice, only emptiness, a cold, hollow void more terrifying than anger itself. Then Ethan turned and walked away, leaving Daniel alone in a room filled with silence. When Ethan returned to the room, Bella was still lying there, pretending to be fast asleep. Her face looked so peaceful, so heartbreakingly calm, that it almost made his chest tighten. He sat down beside the bed and looked at her, the woman who had once been his entire world. And for the first time, he felt nothing, no love, no anger, no pain, only a vast, hollow space where his heart used to burn. He didn't say a word, no questions, no accusations, no explanations. From that moment on, silence became his weapon. He treated her as if everything were normal, still made her morning coffee, still asked gentle questions, still smiled the same familiar smile. But behind that calm exterior was a storm quietly gathering strength. Ethan wanted her to live with uncertainty, to wake up every day wondering, does he know? What will he do? When will it all explode? Bella tried to act normal, but her eyes kept darting away, never meeting his. And each time he looked at her, he no longer saw his wife, only a stranger wearing her face. In that silent war, the one who suffered most wasn't Ethan, it was her, because she had to live in the very fear she created. Ethan understood something profound. Sometimes the cruelest revenge is to do nothing at all, to let the betrayer be destroyed by their own guilt and dread. That day, a cold drizzle began to fall, the kind of rain that feels like a quiet ending. Ethan sat in the living room, calm as always, until a knock came at the door. Bella went to answer it. A man in a suit stood outside, holding a stack of papers. He smiled politely and said, "Mrs. Bella? I'm here to deliver your divorce papers." She froze, silent for a few seconds, then turned toward Ethan, eyes wide with panic. He was still sitting there, calm, holding a steaming cup of coffee. When their eyes met, there was no love left, no anger, just an endless emptiness. Bella's voice trembled as she forced a smile. "Ethan, what is this? Is this some kind of joke?" He set the cup down, stood up, and walked toward her. His voice was low, steady, and cold as steel. "You slept with my brother." Then you tried to seduce my father. Who do you think you are? The world went silent. Even the sound of rain seemed to disappear. Bella's lips quivered. She tried to speak, to deny, to find something, anything, to say. But no words came. Tears began to fall, streaking down the face that once made Ethan weak in the knees. Now it only reminded him of lies, of fake smiles, false love, and the fragile mask that had finally shattered. He turned away, walked to the closet, and pulled out an old suitcase. No yelling, no swearing, no violence. Just quiet, deliberate movements. Each of Bella's belongings folded neatly and tossed into the suitcase, as if he were packing away fragments of a life that no longer existed. "You have 20 minutes to leave," he said, his voice flat, almost lifeless. Bella collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. "Ethan, I was wrong. I know I hurt you, but I still love you. Please, just give me another chance." He stopped, looked at her. His eyes were so empty, so cold, that for a moment she forgot how to breathe. "No, Bella. You don't love anyone. You just love being desired." Then he turned away and opened the door. Outside, the rain had grown heavier, falling in thick, steady sheets. Bella stood, trembling, eyes red and swollen. She dragged the suitcase toward the door, not saying another word. The sound of the door closing behind her was sharp, final. A single punctuation mark at the end of 8 years of love. Ethan sat down on the couch and stared into the distance. The house was so silent he could hear his own heartbeat. Slow, heavy, but steady. No tears, no rage. Just an eerie calm. Because sometimes, when you've lost everything, the only thing left is freedom. After Bella left, Ethan thought it was finally over. But deep down, there was still something unsettled. Something that hadn't yet been restored. His dignity. To him, it wasn't about pride. It was about truth. About reclaiming the honesty that her lies had buried. A few weeks later, Ethan opened his old phone, the one that still held the evidence his father, Robert, had sent him. Screenshots of Bella and Daniel's messages. Short, simple lines, but enough to destroy every excuse, every justification. He stared at them for a long time. Then, he turned on his laptop. That night, a new post appeared on the Facebook page of their small town. It was long, calm, and signed Ethan Miller. No insults, no bitterness. Just the truth. Written plainly, accompanied by the screenshots. He wrote, "I don't want pity. I just want people to know, sometimes the one who betrays you isn't a stranger out there, but the person sleeping beside you every night." By morning, the post had spread everywhere. The whole town was buzzing. Some pitied him, some were shocked, some simply shook their heads in disbelief. Ethan didn't care. He printed out the post and the screenshots, then pinned them to bulletin boards, taped them to the grocery store window, even placed them on the church door, the place where the whole town gathered every Sunday. When Bella found out what Ethan had done, she nearly lost her mind. She called him, her voice breaking through tears. "You're destroying my life!" Ethan's reply was calm, almost a whisper. "No, Bella. You destroyed it yourself a long time ago. I just held up a mirror for everyone to see." From that day on, Bella became a story everyone knew, but no one dared to mention. She lost her job. Her friends drifted away. And eventually, she disappeared, quietly leaving town. Ethan later heard she'd moved somewhere far off, living in isolation, rarely seen again. One afternoon, a close friend asked him if he regretted making everything public. Ethan smiled faintly and said, "She took my dignity. I only took back what was mine, to many. What Ethan did seemed cruel. But to him, it wasn't revenge. It was redemption. The only way to restore truth and stand tall again in a world where trust had been shattered beyond repair." And in the silence of that golden sunset, for the first time in months, Ethan felt his chest rise easily, as if he could finally breathe again, as if he'd been set free. From a psychological perspective, I, Veronica Hale, often tell my patients this: betrayal doesn't always begin with infidelity. Sometimes it begins with emptiness, the kind that grows quietly inside a person who's forgotten who they are. Bella was a textbook example of that. She didn't betray Ethan out of lust. Number. What she truly craved was power, the thrill of being desired, of manipulating the emotions of the men closest to Ethan. It was a distorted form of self-worth, the kind where a person only feels valuable when others want them. I've seen many Bellas in my counseling room. They don't need love, they need validation. They measure their worth through the eyes of others. And in their desperate attempt to prove they're special, they lose the only two things that could ever make them truly special: honesty and dignity. Bella may have believed she was winning, that by seducing both Ethan's brother and nearly his father, she had proven her irresistible power. But in truth, that was the moment she lost everything, because power built on betrayal is always temporary. It burns bright, for a moment, and then fades into cold, silent ash. D7. And Bella's ending was inevitable. The more she tried to define herself through desire, the more she lost. Not just her husband, not just her reputation, but her ability to recognize her own true worth. There's something I always tell the audience of Love and Lies TV. Betrayal doesn't begin when you touch another person. It begins when you stop respecting yourself. And sadly, Bella had forgotten that long ago. In marriage, betrayal has never been just about the body. It's the betrayal of trust. The moment someone can look straight into the eyes that once made their heart race and still choose to cause pain. When that happens, no one wins. There are only souls left behind, heavy, hollow, and lost. For Ethan, the greatest loss wasn't his wife. It was trust, the belief that love could last forever. But sometimes, losing something is the only way to be saved. He didn't lose a woman. He escaped a toxic one, someone who loved only herself and drew validation from the pain of others. In my work, I've seen countless marriages fall apart, and there's one thing they all share. The betrayer always believes they're in control, that they hold the power to shape the story. But time always tells the truth. Because betrayal is a double-edged sword. One side wounds the betrayed, but the other cuts deep into the betrayer's own soul. It took Ethan years to rebuild his trust, to find peace again. But he did. Not through revenge, but by letting go of the past and walking toward the light. And that's what I want everyone watching this video to remember. When someone betrays you, don't let them steal your dignity or your kindness. Walk away, hold your head high, because sometimes silence is the loudest voice you'll ever have. I'm Veronica Hale, and if you believe that every painful story can become a lesson that makes us stronger, then please like, comment, and share this video. Tell me your story, because maybe, just maybe, your story will inspire someone who's still learning how to rise from the wreckage. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of Love and Lies TV, where we don't just talk about love. We learn how to love ourselves the right way.